Welcome to the channel. Thank you guys for tuning in. As you saw in the intro video, today's video I'm going to be reviewing the Phylida Omega Aqua Terra Homage. This is a relatively new brand. I just discovered it not long ago myself. The description and advert on the AliExpress store made the watch look really interesting, so I thought I'd get it in, see what the watch is all about and if it's worth what they're asking for it, and if it is worth buying. I have gone to the liberty of removing the watch from all its packaging so I can get straight into the review. As you can see, the packaging is decent, it's okay, it does the job. It's nothing fantastic. However, you know, you've got to cut corners on some aspects, or rather the watch is great and the box not so great, but it does need to be a little balance as well. I am going to pause you right there. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Your support is appreciated, and also hit that notifications button to make sure you're up to date with all the latest reviews. While you do that, also check out the description. If you like the watch, I'll leave a AliExpress affiliate link in the description. If you don't know what affiliate links are, it's just a commission-based link from AliExpress to me, because I'll get a bit of commission from AliExpress because I'm driving traffic to the site. It won't cost you any more, and it's a way of me getting something back from AliExpress, so that I can put something back in to the channel. Remember to give it a thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you don't like it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. For the next part, I'm going to send you over to the AliExpress store, where I'll show you the other color options available, and in that we'll also cover the dimensions and the specifications. Then we'll come back and go straight into the detailed review. Now we're on the Phylida AliExpress store. Let's go down and look at a few of the options available. This is the one with the blue dial. We can scroll through, look at some of the stock pictures. You'll see the dimensions there. We'll cover those at the end of this little clip. Just scrolling through some of the stock pictures, some close-ups, just to see what they've got on offer. To see the other versions, you'll have to go into the store and look at the other options available. So if I scroll down, I can see what I have on recommended for you. So the other color option they do is black. That does look pretty nice, and they also do a white dial with that turquoise blue and red numbers on the dial. Again, doesn't look too bad, and we can see the price on the Phylida store is £70 per watch, and from what you can see already, it does look pretty specced out. So I'd love to go into it further and to see what this watch really has got to offer. Dimensions and specs. The case size is a 41mm diameter case with a thickness of 13.5mm. The movement used is a Pearl DG5833. We're going to touch upon the movement later on. The lug width is 20mm, lug to lug is 48mm. The material of the case is 316L stainless steel. Crystal used is a double dome sapphire. You've got blue lume on the dial and a 100-meter water resistance. As you can already see, the watch does boast pretty impressive specifications and dimensions alike. I think this watch would be a great contender for Corgeut, Parnis, Pagani and that sort of range. So it's that time we crack open the box and get into it ourselves. The watch is now at the box. The only thing that came extra with it was this little Phylida tag. We can put that away. Let's just give you a once over around the watch. As you can see, it's already a fingerprint magnet, but I'll clean it as we go along. Okay, the first thing I want to go into, and that's purely because I am a bit of a geek and I want to cover the movement. My biggest issue with these Chinese watches is I don't know enough about movements. I know there's a lot of people that don't actually care, but that geeky nature of mine, I have to know what's in there, how good it is. Especially because if I'm going to review it, and if I do end up, for example, reselling them on my eBay page, I want to make sure I'm giving out good, reliable watches. So I had a quick look into this. So the movement listed, it's a Pearl DG5833 GMT movement. This movement's made by a company called Mingzhu. It's a Chinese movement, and from what I found out, it's actually based on the DG2813, which is another popular movement used by Parnis, Pagani, Corgeut and the like. Now that DG2813 is based on the Miyota 8215. Now Corgeut use a lot of 8215 Miyota movements. Now, bit of discrepancy. When you actually Google the movement, you get a movement that looks totally different. And I think this could be an actual DG3804 movement, which is a GMT movement made by the same company. But that's the nature of China. You know, they've got so many clone movements, so many. It's just a madness. So there are a few people out there which really do know what they're talking about. Usually watchmakers. So it's always a good source, which is what I just did now. Go on to Google, do your research a bit if you really want to know to that detail about the movement that your watch is running. Reliability wise, I'll tell you straight, I was really impressed. There's not much on there in terms of unreliable cases out there. And from what I can tell, the DG2813 is a very solid, robust movement. It's an improvement on the Miyota because it gives you hand winding and hacking. Sorry, the Miyota does give hand winding, but it doesn't give hacking. So this movement, let's just cover it. You can unscrew the crown. You can hand wind it. The winding is quite audible. One click. If you rotate it clockwise, that will operate the GMT hand. Now, an inherent function of this movement, when you click it back in, the GMT hand does move. Now that's due to some possible slack in the gearing in the mechanism. What that means is, it's just you've just got to when you set it, you've got to bear that in mind and just put the hand slightly before the actual time you want to hit. If you pull it out fully, sorry, before you pull it out, so while you change the GMT hand, if you now rotate it anti-clockwise, you can change the date. Pull it out fully in the number 2 position, and then you've got your second hand that will stop, and then that allows you to set the time, but you've got to set it clockwise, and you'll see all hands are linked, and the GMT hand will also move with the hour hand. Movement out the way. Let's get into the style, the aesthetics of the watch. As you can tell, it does bear quite a resemblance to the Omega Aqua Terra. There's a lot of features that it shares with it. Let's focus in on the dial. So you have a teak dial style, which is where you've got a linear pattern on the dial. Most of the numbering on the dial is actually printed. So you've got a minute track that goes around the outside of the dial. And then you've got the 24-hour indices that go around, which is also printed. The name, Phylida, is printed along with GMT automatic. The GMT is in red, which matches the GMT hand. I'd say the nicer thing about this dial is when you look at it closer, you do have some really fine details. So the indices that are applied, which is your hour markers, they are brushed. Let's see if I can get something closer. Let's get a really good picture. So you can see the markers are brushed with polished chamfer edges, and you've got the loom which has been applied to the center of them. Hands, you've got what I would call a mix between Dauphine and arrow style hands, and you've got a red GMT arrow hand. So there's a nice amount of detail in the dial, and it goes to show, you know, for the asking price, they can still go quite a way with when it comes to smaller details and refinements and finishing on watches. Loom has been applied to the GMT seconds hand, the hour and the minute hand. However, the loom, like with the Pagani and the Parnis, it is really poor. So I'll give you the loom shot now before we move on to the crystal and the case. The loom is dark blue in color. It is quite dull and it's gonna have very poor longevity. And I'd say that is probably the standard for this price point. Before we address the case, let's look at the domed sapphire crystal. I did check it with my diamond selector too, and it is a sapphire crystal. However, it's not the better quality one. As most of you probably know, they are different. I mean, there's unlimited amount of grades when it comes to sapphire crystals, as the optical lenses. However, the two that I've seen is when you use the diamond selector, some will move up to like 5, 6, and then you'll get some that sit up to 9 and just below 9. So that will tell you there is a slight difference. However, it is still classed as sapphire crystal, so it'll give you that extra scratch resistance. I was interested in looking at the fit and finish of the actual crystal and how it complements the shape, and I'd say it's a good choice to go with the dome crystal. It does round it off from the top really nicely, and you can also see that it doesn't sit too flush or too proud over the actual edge of the bezel, which it's nice that they've gone with that. You do see some watches where they've just put a random type of crystal in there and it actually doesn't fit the watch, or it doesn't suit the actual aesthetics of the watch. The bezel, there is none. Well, there is no rotatable bezel. This one does use a static and polished bezel. I think it's about time to just give it a quick wipe down because it's just caught so much fingerprints. So the case style, as mentioned, it is paying homage to the Omega Aqua Terra. So it's got an asymmetrical case shape, which basically means the right hand side of the case is just a touch thicker to give it just extra cushioning to the actual crown. You've got a mix of brushed and polished edges. So we've got polished around the bezel. You've got this really nice polished edge that goes around the case, very smooth, no sharp edges at all. And the side of the case, you've got a very fine, I'd say, brushing, linear brushing that goes along the side of the case. You've also got this really nice machined and angled feature on the lugs. I think that is really nice to see that on the case. Adds that bit of luxury, just a few more dimensions while making cases, so it's not just a squared off angular case. And as I said, the quality of the case is really well. There's no sharp edges, and usually on this price point you do catch a few sharp edges. You'll catch some really coarse brushing, or the polishing is just not up to that level, but this actually is. The crown is a sterile crown, case back, sterile case back, but it's a screw down case back. Mix of polished and circular brushing on the center. The crown action is really nice. There's a smooth threading to the crown, and there's decent grip present on the crown. So you should have no problem adjusting time, setting the time, and screwing it back down. I did double check the dimensions with my caliper, and they are within spec to what the actual what they are on the store. And dimensionally, I think it's a good fit for smaller wrists. I've got a 6.5 inch wrist, and it is below the markers that I put out there. So I say anything over 50 mil shouldn't really fit. It's not really for a 6.5 inch. So you've got a lug to lug of 48 mil and a 41 mil diameter, and I think it's a pretty decent zone, judging by what all the subscribers say. I'd say it is in that nice Goldilocks zone for most wrists. On that note, let me just give you a wrist shot, and then we'll cover the bracelet, and then we should be able to finish the review there. For reference purposes, my wrist is 6.5 inches, and as mentioned, with the dimensions of the watch, it does seem to fit in that Goldilocks zone for smaller wrists. Moving on to the bracelet, visually you can see you've got brushed sides and a polished center link. Now the brush sides, linear brushing, and it does go really well with this angled and brushed lug end. Personally, I don't like polished center links. Again, they just pick up grease and fingerprints and marks, and you know, you'll spend your time cleaning the watch through the day rather than actually just forgetting about it and wearing it. I also find that brush finishes just give it that slight touch of elegance, make it look a bit better, but that's just purely subjective, and that's my opinion. Other than that, I'd say this bracelet is pretty well. It's one of the nicer bracelets I've seen for this price point. You've got solid end links. And the first thing you want to look at when you get solid end links, everyone wants to see the fit and finish. So you can see they sit pretty flush and they sit really tight with the case. So fit and finish is really good on these end links and generally the bracelet overall. You can see how that fits snugly into the case. And to be honest, you couldn't really get any snugger than that. It's also flush to the lug end, so that's really good. The bracelet, it does actually taper. There's a slight taper to it, to the clasp. So it starts out obviously 20, you've got 19, and it'll go down to 18 mil. The clasp itself, you've got a butterfly clasp. I don't mind them too much. You know, I'm really just used to diver clasps, but I'd say, judging by what kind of clasp it would have had if it was a diver, it would have had that nasty cheap stamped clasp. I don't actually mind this. It's good. It feels okay. I want to say it feels really, really solid, but it feels okay. I'd say the dislike on this is you can't close it any way you want. You have to close this side first, and then no, you have to close that side first, and then you can close this side. It does feel slightly flimsy. You've got a slight bit of play in there, and you've got a brushed top of the clasp. There's no logo. I haven't seen Phylida have a logo per se aside from the name, so I don't know how I'd feel if it said Phylida over there. I'm not too fussed. I think on certain brands, the more sterile the case background and clasp is, I'd say it's a bit more user friendly, especially if it's come from China. You know, the name on the dial, I don't really mind because a lot of people are modding now, so you could always change the dial out. But the rest of the case bracelet, it's okay to have it sterile, I suppose. The overall finishing, there's no sharps, there's nothing sharp, there's nothing really to call out on the bracelet. I would say that it can be just refined that little bit better, and basically the links just need a slight bit of smoothing out, but it's not sharp. You can just feel them. It is quite comfortable on the wrist. I think one of the main points that a lot of people will like is it does have screw down end links. Now these are micro screws, so you need a smaller, quite a small screwdriver and a quite thin screwdriver. And the other interesting thing about these is, whereas if you look on the other side, there's no holes, so the thread on the actual screw is just below the head. As you unscrew it out, you'll see there's a slight threading around the actual screw. It is slightly fidgety getting them out. You have to make sure it's unscrewed properly and then use some tweezers to just maneuver it out. And that's that on the screw down end links. I personally don't mind. I hate the collar style, the pin and collar style links in watches. The Seiko ones just annoy me. It's such hard work, and so I don't really mind those split pins. They have quality issues. Yes, you need fairly decent split pins, and I find they're so easy. Just push them out, change your end link, and you're done with it. The screws, the only thing with the screws is you do need to use Loctite to make sure they're secure. And the thing is, you can ruin them if you're not using the right screwdriver. So then, you know, and the sometimes the threading isn't the best, and they do kind of catch, and they can cause damage to the bracelet, and you could be stuck with a bracelet that you can't size. That's me done for the review, basically. Just a quick summary on everything. I'd say it is really well executed. Phylida have done a really good job. If this is one of the first or initial pieces, I wish them the best of luck. I'd say they can make, you know, similar pieces. They should stick to this. They've done quite a lot for the money. I don't know how this compares against, I know Corgeut do one, maybe Parnis, I'm not too sure. So I don't know how it compares against them. If they are very similar, then they've just used the same case. But just from judging by just what they have, it is really well executed. I love the smaller features, even if the dial or just the watch isn't for you. I do appreciate just the finer details they've gone to on the actual dial, and how they have made it look. Also like the case, the brushing, the logins. I love how the bracelet fits. It has improved, you know, because you have to do a lot more give and take when you're buying watches at this price point. You have to live with a lot of things which you don't like, or you know, you wouldn't have. This doesn't have much of that. I do like just the small subtle features. I forgot to mention the date window when I covered the dial. But you can see the date window isn't square, but it's the way it's been cut out is just to sort of go with the style of the index at the 3 o'clock position. So I think that's a nice little touch. And as I mentioned, the movement in there seems to be pretty solid, apart from that slight little knack you've got to deploy when you actually set the GMT hour time. So pretty cool looking sports watch with a GMT function. It is a no-brainer. So if the Pagani, Rolex, Yachtmaster styles aren't for you, dive styles aren't for you, then this, I'd seriously consider this. And I might go for the black. Had I seen the black first, I probably would have gone for it, but this is the first one I saw, and like the specs sort of sold me on it, you know, just worth checking out. Okay, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments of the watch. As mentioned earlier, please go into the description if you want to purchase it. And like always, thank you for subscribing, thank you for all your input and all the comments, and I'll see you for the next video.